welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have a returning guest, Olivia Abdoo. How we doing?
Good. How are you, Manny? Thanks for having me back.
It's all good. Again, I we were kind of speaking on in the lobby about the UFC and everything that goes into it and how I am a fan, and the fact that you, Becky, even Gav, sort of, and
Glenn, right? Yeah.
yeah, the yous have all came on and sort of expanded this a little bit further for me. So I'm always very appreciative of you guys and always love chatting to you guys. But for those who have perhaps not watched the episode you've done previously, if you give us a little background on who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are. Have you ever wondered how I'm able to run my business, my podcast, and still be able to coach? Well, I use TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is an all in one coaching software that reduces the amount of time that we spend on the back end of programming, on our Google Sheets, on our Excels, and allows me more freedom to do testing. With this podcast and episodes, I'm actually able to run some programs that I learned through different coaches coming on. To find out how you can use TeamBuildr and how it can apply to your own program, visit the link in the description and catch yourself a 30-day free trial. Just simply use code PACHOCUP, that's PACHALQUP, and start the next stage of your coaching career.
Yeah. So, again, thanks, Manny, for having me back on. I'm always shocked when people ask again and want to listen to me ramble on about who knows what, usually concussion, which is what we'll chat about today. But yeah, my name's Olivia Abdoo. I am a physical therapy manager for the UFC. I'm also a sports certified specialist and a strength and conditioning specialist as well. So, I ended up here. I went to PT school in Cal State Long Beach. After that, went on to do a sports residency over at Duke, just getting some specialized hands-on training there. And then I moved on to do a Division I physical therapy fellowship over at Wake Forest University, working at that high-level, complex, interdisciplinary environment, working all in with football, men and women's basketball, baseball, and a couple other things sprinkled in there. And then after that, wanted to get into professional sports. Initially wanted basketball, and then somehow ended up here working with mixed martial arts athletes. We also see a variety of other professional athletes, NFL, NBA, WNBA, MLB, here at the UFC PI, which is located in Las Vegas. And so the PI is kind of almost like your high level, like any professional sport. We have every discipline that you could want, all free of charge for our UFC contracted athletes here in Vegas.
Love it. Again, I always get so amped up because like that facility just always sounds nuts, and there's so much going on all at the same time. It's again, I've obviously followed a lot of sports, but I know there's a rugby team. I think it was either was it New Zealand that was across there.
Yeah, we now host. Okay, everybody's gonna get pissed at me. It's NRL or the other one. One of those comes through. We now host a game, and usually we have last time we had somewhere between like 4 to 6 teams come through. So
Mm.
using our facility, and then they played at Allegiant Stadium for the day, which is cool. I mean, last year, every year, it's gotten bigger and bigger.
Yeah, when I do my tour of America, I need to come by.
Absolutely.
I'm really interested in some of the stuff that we talked about in the lobby. You kind of mentioned the graded interval test and the concussion protocols that comes with it. Can we dive into that and sort of what you've built and how to implement it in a
Yeah,
variety of
absolutely.
situations?
Yeah. So when I first started here, so a lot of my background in concussion comes from Duke, which is why I wanted to go there for sports residency. And so the standard of care when we're looking at evaluating an athlete post concussion, we're really trying to break down and figure out what kind of clinical domain or profile athletes fit into. And so depending on the literature you read, the different facilities and entities out there, there's a lot of different ways you can break it down. I break it down into cervical, migraine, anxiety mood, autonomic, vestibular, ocular. sleep kind of like a subset of that. And so those are kind of the main profiles that I try and when I evaluate an athlete, figure out which clinical domain they primarily fall into. Just like with any other injury presentation, people are always going to fall into a multitude of things. But for our athletes, particularly when it comes to the interval tests, we're looking at assessing the autonomic system. So we're assessing the cardiovascular system as a proxy of, is the autonomic system functioning, right? With a progressive graded exercise test, right? Your heart rate should respond in a very predictable way. As intensity goes up, heart rate follows that. And so what we see, and so what's been established in the literature and kind of clinical practice, is the Buffalo treadmill test by John Letty, which has been well established for identifying individuals who do not tolerate exercise. And so with that, it's on a treadmill. There's also a bike version, which was initially created for individuals who couldn't get out of bed or like couldn't walk on a treadmill. And so it was like, if we can at least get them to a bike and doing something that's slightly less impact or whatever that might be, is the bike. Um, but what I had found, particularly when I came here to UFC, was that the Buffalo test was too easy for our athletes. Our athletes' cardiovascular like endurance is insane. Um, and I reached out to other professional teams and getting kind of similar results depending on the type of athlete they were working with. Um, and so for me, when you actually look up the definition of exercise tolerance when it comes to the Buffalo and testing the autonomic system, they say like exercise tolerance is tolerating close to 80 to 90% of your max heart rate.
Mm.
The Buffalo test is not even, it's not even touching close to that. They're only hitting like 125 to 130 beats per minute, which is that like aerobic threshold for sure. But if you actually break it down and look at that definition, our athletes aren't getting close to seeing if they actually tolerate that higher intensity exercise. So I ended up sitting down with our team and our sports science team who are really experts in exercise physiology, and I said, "Hey, do we care that we're actually not testing athletes close to this high intensity threshold?" And it seems like in general, the consensus from a lot of other facilities, like, yeah, no, it's fine. We don't have to. And I just didn't really believe in that because our athletes have to do such physically demanding activities and training that I want to see, can they tolerate that? Not only just from, are they having a normal heart rate response, but symptomatically, are they tolerating those high intensities? And so we ended up taking kind of the skeleton of the buffalo and created our own interval test, which is still in its infancy, because the question I always get is, have you published blah blah blah? We're still working it out right now, but ultimately the test is a graded bike test. The biggest thing for me, because the buffalo is still valid, it's still a very valid test. It was super sensitive and specific when it came to even collegiate athletes or like my weekend warriors, high school athletes. It's still a good test. It still helped me tease out abnormal autonomic response and symptom provocation in those athletes. And so for us, though, the graded interval test is on the bike. And I truly believe in doing a bike versus the treadmill because my goal is to test the autonomic system, that domain. So I need to get rid of all the other systems. The problem with the treadmill, right? You get neck, you get vestibular, all sorts of stuff. So I am a big proponent of doing on the bike. And our sports scientists agreed with that to truly isolate that system. And so with that, we changed up the intervals in the sense of we have them do a 2-minute warm up. They're maintaining 80 RPM. The Buffalo treadmill test or the Buffalo bike test has it at 60 RPM, which is very, very slow. And so you actually need that higher speed to get after your aerobic system, the cardiovascular system. The 60 RPMs is so slow that you're just gonna like get that local fatigue super early because we're still grading it. And so we just change the watts um, for each cycle. So we have them do a minute at 80 RPMs at a certain amount of watts, and then they actually do a minute of recovery at a slightly lower output. And so then each kind of interval gets harder and harder. It's also a nice setup because within that 1 minute recovery, one, is their heart rate actually recovering during that 1 minute? It gives me time as a clinician to ask my questions, which mirrors the Buffalo. Like, are you having any symptoms? How hard are you working? We use the RPE scale, we use a 0 to 10 scale. Our athletes can understand that a lot better than that 6 to 20. And then I can document my heart rate and everything like that. We also use, we're playing around with the Frontier, which is a one lead
Mm.
EKG to monitor heart rate. And so, again, getting into the nitty gritty, our director of sports science here, um, he is highly, highly efficient and licensed in EKG reading. So he can help kind of like dive into some of that. um, in the lobby, you had asked me like, am I allowed, like, how often can I play around and try things and do stuff?
Mm.
Like, it's been great, and to have a team that helps facilitate that has been great, because I wouldn't have even have thought to utilize that, because I've always just tracked heart rate and just kind of documented throughout that. But to get more information, whether we use it or not, right? Like, who knows? But for now, it's been really interesting to see a monitor. Um, and so with that, we kind of look for, it's a combination of things. If we don't have any baseline data on athletes, we're looking for somewhere between 160 and 170 beats per minute for their like heart rate to hit. That's kind of based on general normative VO2 max data that we have. But if athletes have come in and we have testing on them, we actually know what their max heart rate is, and we can take that 80 to
Mm.
90% of that and know what we need to hit target wise. So, like, for example, we had an athlete come in yesterday to get his full gambit of concussion testing done. He had a fight about 5 weeks ago, but was getting intermittent dizziness, headache, things like that. So we threw him on the test. And so previously, we had another guy do it, smaller weight class, super in shape, killed it, got through about 10 rounds, hit about 170 ish. And then this guy that came in, a little heavier, he got through six. So initially, we're like, okay, well, do we know what like the norms are? Do we need to create weight class norms? I don't know. He only hit
Mm.
about 156 beats per minute. Before, for him, he was like, no, my heart feels fine. Legs kind of just got tired. But so I was like, oh, maybe he is not tolerant. But then when you look at his heart rate data that we do have, that's about 85% of his heart rate max that we were hitting. So
Mm.
and he didn't have symptoms. Well, he felt a lot better, which ultimately for me is a sign that we're probably still dealing with a concussion. It just is not an autonomic dysfunction, because we still know that aerobic activity helps facilitate and speed up recovery, regardless if they have exercise intolerance or not. So for him, started off symptomatic, felt a lot better, ultimately passed the test from an autonomic assessment piece. But he was like, oh my God, I feel amazing after that. Headaches gone, dizziness gone. And then we had a couple of like positive tests with some of the vestibular assessment that we did. So would still consider him like within that like post concussion. We're still gonna treat it as such. So that's kind of where that interval test came. And so with that, we also have a secondary component that is almost like, if you're familiar with like the Chicago Blackhawk test, or UPMC has the exit test. Both include some type of aerobic graded test component. It's not like we're doing anything, drastically different. We're just
Mm.
actually making it specific to our athletes. Just because you can hit 130 doesn't really tell me that you're actually ready to get back into the high level training that you're probably expecting to get back into. So that's the first half of the test. And then we have like a secondary piece, which is like a movement assessment. It's like a tactical movement assessment. So this is kind of like our performance movement profile. And so it's 3 stages. It's 3 5-minute rounds. Our athletes love to hear that, right? It's in their lingo. It gives them a good like mindset going into it. The first round is just like a dynamic movement. It's like a circuit. So we
Mm-hmm.
have them do almost like burpees into a sprawl. We have them do break falls. So getting that like change in head position and all different planes of motion. We have them do skater hops with a med ball with a good head turn. And then we do a lateral bear crawl with a rotation. So we're getting them on the ground in closed chain positions that we know that they're going to be in with some transverse plane movement and rotation. We had an athlete several months ago who was also dealing with a concussion. He had progressed really well. All of his symptoms were anytime he turned his head to the left. He also had a history of left sided stingers. So he kind of fell into that vestibular ocular domain and cervical domain. And so we addressed a lot of that. And when we were finally taking him through his like kind of that return to play test, this tactical movement component, he passed everything except for when he did that lateral bear crawl rotating to the left.
Mm.
So his head was turning to the left. So it does really help tease out a lot of that stuff, and it gets them on the mats in an environment that is a
They're
little
comfortable with.
yeah, exactly. Um, and so they'll do a couple rounds of that. Second round is it's our kind of like, we call it our ground and pound round. So they'll do a med ball wall walk. So they do like a little Valsalva, a clinch of a med ball against a wall, and they
Mm.
shoot up and down. So we're getting kind of like those dynamic changes in pressure within the body. How does that feel? How are they tolerating that? And then they'll carry I believe it's a 70-pound bag. Carry that bag for 10 seconds, then they'll drop it, and then they'll do 10 seconds of ground and pound. Just to like backtrack a little bit, this whole piece of like this tactical movement component was developed in conjunction with our strength and conditioning team, which was super helpful to get insights into like what they think is most important for our athletes, because they have such
Mm.
excellent experience with that as well. So keeping in mind just like all these pieces never happen in that like silo at all. I'm always working with, we're bringing in sports science, we're bringing in strength and conditioning, we're developing nutrition supplementation and education for brain health and following fights. So it's never just me or never just our team. So I always like to give a shout out for that because we couldn't have developed this piece without them. So that's the second round. Third round is our cognitive task. So now that they're fatigued,
Mm.
we're going to test their cognitive abilities. So we do just like it's like a 3 cone, kind of like change of direction. And so I just have a PowerPoint up and blocks pop up on the PowerPoint. Whichever side the block is on, they run to that cone and come back. So really simple task. Um, and then the second round, we're using blaze pods, and it's a
Mm.
multitasking piece. So they will side shuffle to whichever blaze pod lights up, and depending on the color, they perform a certain task. Blue, they do a 1-2 combo. Red is a sprawl. And then green is a teep front kick. And so they'll do that. Third round, they'll go back to the first task, which is with the blocks, but this time it's arrows. So now, depending on which arrow the direction is pointing, that's the direction they go. Doesn't matter which side it's on. So it's an added level of working memory, attention, and processing, because you're getting incongruent feedback depending on which side the arrow is and which way it's pointing. Then we go back to the blaze pods and we add a fourth color. It's yellow.
Mm.
That's a no go. You stay where you are, you don't go to it, you ignore it, right? Another added test. And then we actually don't remind them of what the colors and the tasks were. Their goal
Okay.
is to remember that and do that. And so we took a lot of athletes who were non concussed or healthy athletes and took them through that just to get feedback. And ultimately they all gave us great feedback. We're like, okay, this is good. Like, you're right. If I had a concussion, there's no way I'd be able to do some of this stuff. And so that's kind of our full gambit of our like part of the autonomic domain, and then exercise tolerance within that. Obviously that last like tactical movement assessment, there's a lot of different components in it, but once they complete that and they do well with that, I'm far more confident that they're going to be able to get back into more technical training. And that's not to say that prior to them doing this test, I haven't cleared them to do some things,
Mm.
right? I probably have cleared them to like hit the bag if the impact doesn't bother them, or hitting some pads or doing some jujitsu drilling where they're just on top, but they're just not rolling, things like that. I definitely have pushed much farther and quicker, partly because just the like anxiety piece of things. The sooner I can get them to do something, the better
Mm.
they automatically feel, versus keeping them in a dark room. They can't do anything besides the bike. And sometimes you do have to do that. Sometimes you absolutely need to like take that time. Um, but the sooner I can get them back into the environment that they love and that they work for, they tend to do a lot better. So that was a really long spiel. So my apologies.
No, so again, I've kept up. So I kind of wanted you to just go through it again. I didn't. Obviously, we hadn't spoke about this prior,
Mm,
so I'm fascinated with a couple of things, and I've got a couple of questions. You mentioned the profiles of
mhm.
how the concussions work and different places it can be, and it does seem that part 1 to 3 is tailored to the different profiles and how they may present their symptoms of the concussion and how that can affect how an athlete again returns to sport, because that's essentially the goal of all of this is to how can I get my athlete from point A to point B as fast as possible but also as safe as possible. um with coming up, and again you mentioned it but I kind of want to highlight the importance of it. The UFC PI has an amazing collaborative system, and when I had Becky on, when I had you, when I had Glenn, you all spoke about this like infinite circle that everyone gets passed around as quick as possible to make sure that they're getting everything needed. So when you are coming up with a test, you can see the influence of each piece in there. Um, how was it collaborating on this project, on this test, with the sports science, with the S&C, with the nutrition, with yourselves?
It's a good question. I think that kind of the keys to all that is being around a team that is always open minded, and everybody is agreeing that they're trying to learn and get better always. I think when new things get brought to the table, a lot of the time, people immediately go on the defense,
Hmm.
right? Like I think that's just like
Egos,
it's human
yeah.
nature. Like that's just how we feel, and so being able to present things in a way of, I mean, here's one thing I will say. This is like, we previously just used Buffalo, which mostly sports medicine was running. We didn't really have like a lot of other departments involved in that because it's a very straightforward test we're just seeing. And so what has been really great is coming in to provide almost like a brand new evaluation, a brand new system, versus trying to come in and change a system that has been, established and has worked really well for the time and developed, right? Like, and that's with anybody coming into any new facility, place, system. Um, so I would say in this case, it was a little easier in the sense that this hasn't been done anywhere
Mm.
for combat athletes. So one, the buy-in from all the teams, it was really exciting to be able to be the first ones to develop something like that. But with that, it comes with everybody wanting to learn from each other, but also being open to asking why and questioning.
Mm.
I, luckily, with my career, going through residency and fellowship, that's all that was done to me, was constantly the constant questioning of why I'm doing something, being able to articulate why I'm doing something, then getting feedback, integrating that how I see is most appropriate, and then moving forward from there. Um, so I think for me in particular, coming in and creating something really new, having the mindset of not only asking myself why, but craving other people around
Mm.
me to ask that and not taking that as a challenge or taking it personally. And again, because it's new, it's like, well, I don't really have a lot of backing to say no to that or not trying that or doing this. Initially, when we developed this test, we actually didn't have the bike, we did the air bike.
Okay.
Because us and the S&C team agreed, like, well, this is an upper and lower body sport. Like that made a
Mm,
lot of sense to us. But then when you step back and you, like I was
there's
saying,
still that
right?
vestibular.
Like, it's what am I testing? Sports science is like, what is the goal of this test? It's to test the autonomic system and so on, right? So how do we actually need to do that? We got to take the upper body out of it, right? So then it's like, oh, you're right. Okay, scratch that. We're going to do this now, right? Like, not being afraid. Like, it's tough when you put a lot of time and effort into something and then you kind of just scoot it aside to bring something new in. But letting the ego of that go and recognizing, like, yeah, this is what it's about, is bringing in the people to fill the gaps in your knowledge, and always not being afraid to ask why and question and being skeptical and how can we make it better. um so I think that, I mean, it's been great. I put together, I've been learning to like have, especially when you bring in a new project or new things, um having like a nice presentation with clear like objectives, goals, what I am looking to get out of this. Here's the
Mm,
needs that I think we have, and then what do you guys think? And opening that for discussion. I think always having that clear communication, but again, then having like a good team that you can just like mess around with and
mhm,
like, let's, I mean, for the tactical movement component, we, like us and the S&C team, we just kind of like took it 2 hours like on the mat and just started messing with stuff and trying stuff out. Like, what do we think works well? We brought in athletes, like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Always realizing like your voice. If it's just you in a silo making decisions, it's never gonna like be as
mhm,
good as it absolutely could. And then ultimately, coming to that final decision as a team, like, yep, we agree with this. This works. And ultimately, we're still trying it out. We're still figuring it
mhm,
out. What we are finding is that definitely the tactical movement component is teasing out individuals who are healthy and who are concussed. Um, Now, there's still a lot of data and research we got to develop, but we all know that the clinic environment very fast, research very slow. So we will get there.
mhm. Yeah. So another question I had was, obviously, with a concussion and how individualized it can be, with this three parts of this test, how do you determine, okay, they're clearing in part two, but part one still needs some work and part three is getting there? Like, how is that rating system between the parts?
Yeah, so the way it's set up, ultimately, if you don't pass the interval test, the interval bike test, you don't move on to the movement component piece.
Okay. Okay.
Because we've seen the movement component piece like hits very high heart rates. It's hard. Most of our athletes are rating that test like 8 out of 10. Like, it's challenging, and we're seeing
Okay.
that with their heart rate. So ultimately, if you're not passing the interval test, your autonomic system has some impairment, and you're not tolerating exercise at its most simple form, right? Now, if somebody passes the bike test, then we move on to the rest of it. And ideally, right, like, I'm not doing this piece, like this combat kind of like readiness evaluation. I'm not doing this whole thing if they're really
Mm,
symptomatic. I will
okay.
do that interval test initially if somebody's symptomatic, because I do want to figure out what their symptom like heart rate threshold is to most accurately prescribe aerobic activity, even though anecdotally I've just seen, hey, if you do steady state 20 minutes of what feels good, you tend to be pretty good. But to be as most accurate as possible, right? I want to get that heart rate. So they just will complete the test, however they complete the test, just like the buffalo, right? If they only get 2 rounds, okay, and they're super symptomatic or their heart rate does something funky and drops, we know they're done. Same thing with our interval test. It's just ultimately going to hit by the end, once they actually clear it, hit heart rates that we're trying to see. So if somebody's symptomatic, we have a different kind of like tactical movement assessment. It's more like foundational movement, where
Mm,
it's like
okay.
it's squats, it's lunges, it's med ball rotations. There's some agility ish type things in there that is much simpler
Yeah, we're
that we
regressing it
can,
to the basics.
yeah, so that we can tease that out a little more. So if somebody comes in, they're symptomatic on their clinical evaluation, but they pass their aerobic test, I'm going to do more of that foundational movement assessment. Now, and if athlete comes in or they've been getting treatment and we feel like they're ready to start, like to get cleared to start a sparring progression, they'll do the interval test, and then they'll do this performance like movement profile that's higher level, and so they'll still do both of those, and that's more challenging. And ideally, I'm going to probably push them to complete the whole test, particularly if they, one, I'm always documenting symptoms throughout that, right? So if their symptoms aren't going crazy or they're recovering in between, I feel very comfortable with them continuing. Now, if their symptoms skyrocket with something, probably the outcome of the rest of my test is not going to be very accurate. So I might stop it based on that. But ideally, I push them through, particularly if they fit into that anxiety and mood piece.
Mm.
The more you push them within limits, within, some guide rails there, the more confident they get and the better they feel, because then they realize, like, oh yeah, I can do all this. So those are kind of the ways that I'm ticking that off. Ideally, by that time, doing this high performance movement one, I'm considering clearing them to start a sparring progression and get back into some to contact. And so that's kind of the difference there between the two.
How are you seeing the heart rate play into each part of
Mhm.
the test?
Yeah. So we will monitor heart rate throughout that performance like movement profile, like that higher level, that 3 rounds of 5 minutes. The biggest thing we look at is not just like peak heart rate, like their body's going to respond how they respond, particularly if somebody has been out for a really long time, right? Like we know there might be some changes in just like general like fitness. Most of the time, though, and ideally, right, our athletes aren't going to be out for that long post concussion. They shouldn't, like, they're not going to lose all of their
Mm.
cardiovascular fitness in a week. So, yeah, we look at like peak heart rate and trends throughout, but really we're looking at heart rate recovery. So, one of the ways that we really individualize that movement component piece is during the recovery. So, we actually don't use time as recovery between the different rounds.
You're looking at
We're
heart rate
looking
zones.
Yes, we're looking at
Let's
heart rate
go.
zones. So either we're looking for 120 beats per minute, right, is like sufficient recovery, or if we have baseline data on athletes, we know what their zone 2 specific heart rate is. Okay. The lights just went out. They won't come back
It's all good.
on.
It's all good.
Um,
We can still see you.
so that's how we individualize it. So, okay, they might not be symptomatic, but man, it's taken their heart rate a really long time to get back to normal in between these rounds and to recover. So, one of the things that we really want to build out is some normative data on that, about how long is it taking for people to recover between rounds versus just using like 30 seconds, right? Our heavyweights, they're probably always going to take a lot longer.
A
They're
lot longer.
probably
Yep.
not going to usually complete as many rounds, right? Um, so the future, like where this is going to go, is individualize like normative data for heart rate recovery between rounds, um, number of rounds people can complete, average like target heart rate we're hitting in between that. So that's kind of how we're monitoring heart rate. Ideally, right, when we do the interval test, the heart rate is really giving like that clear graded progression is to identify abnormal autonomic response. So what we'll see is these really big drops in heart rate halfway through the test or at
Mm.
some point in the test, which doesn't, that's not a normal heart rate response. Right, it should continue to go and then it'll plateau once you get close to that max. But people post concussion with autonomic dysfunction, oftentimes outside of just symptom like changes in symptoms, they get this big drop in heart rate. So we can actually tease that out with our graded interval test. We're not necessarily going to tease that out in the movement component, but what we can tease out is that heart rate recovery. Is your heart, is the autonomic system actually responding how it should?
That's really interesting. And I think because it's still in its infancy, you're still able to be flexible with it, which is nice. Are you also looking at, obviously the different weight classes will have a different heart rate response? Are you thinking that a weight class um specifics will have to be established? So like in the NFL, like there's
Mhm.
positional return to play protocols. Like you have to be X body weight, X whatever's to be able to come back to the sport. Is that kind of where you're seeing it going?
So that was something that was brought up by the SNC team, which I think is a really fair question. Because a lot of their data is very different based on the weight class, and they have very clear normative data per weight class. And so we had this big discussion with sports science, as like all of us all together about this, keeping in mind, right, like this is a particular for that interval test, this is a like health safety screen,
Mm,
right? This is not a performance assessment. When you start getting into that high level of performance, there is definitely space and validity, and it's essential to really get into the nitty gritty of weight classes. But for something that is truly just to assess health, right? Like if they're not passing a interval test, they're not safe to be doing their
mm,
sport, right? Now they're safe to do modified versions of it or whatever. Um, but at this time, so that's where it came. It's like, well, right now, particularly as we're still in development, right? In the future, we might see that. But initially, it's like we got to keep in mind that this is different than a performance assessment. It's
hmm.
health and safety. So right now, I
Yeah.
just need them to pass this. Now, as we do more, right, it's going to be right. We know the heavyweights are probably going to have a little harder time. So okay, we might need to change that. We have different setup and settings for males versus females, right?
Okay.
We know
Yeah.
that their males and females are not going to perform the same, so we do have that. Um, so where it goes, I don't know, but I think that especially in an environment like this where everybody is at such a high level all the time, we really do have to keep in mind that, especially from a sports medicine perspective, right? I'm
Hmm.
trying to make sure that they're a healthy and safe individual slash athlete so that when I set them loose to go do strength and conditioning, tactical training, whatever, they are safe to do that. And then S&C can come in and really optimize that, make
Mm.
them the highest performer possible. But that's kind of where I see that coming in
Yeah.
regards.
Um, to summarize, you called me a meathead, and
Well, here's what I'll say. It's
no,
like
no, but
I
that's actually a really important thing to talk about. It's, again, we're looking at data and how we can get them back as quick as possible. You're kind of looking at the health, like there's still the medical side of it. So no, it makes 100% sense what
yeah.
you're saying.
And especially with concussion too, I think we forget, like, when I explain it to athletes, I do try and explain it through like an orthopedic lens because they can really grasp that, right? Like
Mm,
you hurt your knee, you sprain your MCL, right? A couple things. There's biological tissue healing timelines. Perfect. I cannot change that, right? We can try and facilitate that, but I can't change that. Um, there's rehabilitation we can do to maintain strength, address your pain, good motion, things like that, proprioception, all sorts of stuff. And then there's activity modification. I know if I tell you you can't train, you're gonna still do it. So what can
mm,
I give you that's safe to do? It's the same thing with a concussion when I explain it to athletes, right? Is there's biological tissue healing timelines. We know that there is this metabolic cascade, this energy crisis that occurs. There is only so much that we can do from an external point of view, outside of like aerobic activity, to speed that up, right? That's a little out of my control. But there's rehabilitation, right? There's impairments that we can address from a rehab standpoint, and then activity modification, right? So like from the sports medicine side, like that's how I explain it to athletes. But concussion is still, it's that invisible injury,
mhm.
right? Athletes go through these phases of, am I actually concussed? Is this real? Am I going
Mm,
crazy? Am I making it up? Right? Spirals into anxiety. It affects all of their life, not just the MMA portion or the S&C portion, right? They can get changes in emotion and behavior. They might be sleeping more and they can't take care of their family. They can't hang out with friends. They can't do all those other life things. And so, as a healthcare clinician, yes, especially at the professional level, I need you to be able to do your job because you need to make money to support your family.
mm,
But if you can't even function through life, like I am ultimately from, like, again, that health safety standpoint, like I need to get you back to life too. Like that is important because there are things beyond just sports and being an athlete. So that's the, I think, unique perspective that we take from the sports medicine side. Um, so that ultimately, if we address those things, then yeah, everybody else on the team can come in and optimize as athletes so they can have incredible outcomes and ultimately, right, like win. Right, that's the goal here. I'm trying to get you to perform really high and win, even though we don't influence that outcome. But if I can
mm.
get you into the octagon and there, we've done our job.
You mentioned something interesting as well, and it's that cognitive versus physical. And in our last conversation, you mentioned that it actually takes longer for the the brain to process educational stuff. So a lot longer than takes some of the physical elements of it. With at that level, obviously there's a high demand on motor learning skills and some tape. You have to watch tape, you have to do your homework, you have to do all that stuff on them. Are you noticing an impact on that as well, like their ability to come back a lot quicker to the learning portion of their sport?
Yeah, so and that was one of the domains that I didn't mention, but is definitely one, is that like neurocognitive, neuromuscular control, like cognitive piece of things that we assess. So the reason, one of the big reasons why like the cognitive versus the physical, like we know aerobic activity speeds up recovery, like the physical thing, like that is going to be very good for them. So that's where we see that coming in a lot more quickly. I mean, one, when it comes to film, a lot of our athletes do not watch the film. They
Okay.
actually don't. Yeah, but they get their coaches to do it. But
Hmm.
they still have to communicate and strategize with their coaches, right? So like there is still a heavy cognitive load that they have to manage. And you think of like, well, when they're during in their 1 minute recovery, you have loud crowd, bright lights, and coaches trying to tell you and talk to you and get, like coach you, right? Like there's a lot of things that you have to take in and process, and then be able to go out to the fight, remember what was told to
Mm,
you, then create that motor plan, but then also react to the opponent that's in front of you. So when I talk about like neurocognitive skills, I like break it down into um, working memory, attention, and reaction or like response time. And so that part can get really tricky for these athletes, particularly if there's a language barrier. Is like, how can I
mm,
get them? So one of the things that we stopped doing was the 10 words on our concussion assessment. It's like, can you remember these 10 words? And
yeah.
then delayed recall. Ultimately, it doesn't really have any clinical utility. And our athletes, particularly those who spoke Portuguese, could never remember any of the words that started with P for some reason. Um, and so like that's where some of that challenge is. But again, if you get them in their sporting environment, they tend to do a lot better versus if I have them sit in front of a computer and do
Mm,
like an attention test or a working memory test or things like that. So like I'll just get them on like at a bag working on different combos, different combinations, right? That requires not only like processing, working memory. Can you remember the combination, and then can you have that output? I have them do a combination that they need to remember, step out, do some footwork, go back, and then do that combination again, or then do that
mm,
combination in reverse order, things like that. We'll talk to coaches. It's like, hey, what, when you coach, and I'm not a technical coach. I never try and step into that zone. That's not my zone. It's more of a conversation of like, hey, are you noticing anything different when you're athlete, when you're coaching them?
mm.
How do you normally give coaching advice? Like that way I have a better understanding of what they need to get back to, right? are the coaches like pretty short and sweet with what they say? Do coaches go into long, extensive things? Like, gives me some ideas of then how can I best set them up? And then it's like a good test, right? Like our S&C team does like fight simulations. Okay, let's have them go through a fight simulation, and we'll cognitive tests or talk with coaches. Hey, how are they looking? Are they like listening to what you're do? Are they acting the same? So it's definitely challenging in that sense, but it makes it really fun and interesting to start teasing out those things
Mm,
and how do I actually address that in a controlled setting like the clinic, and then like getting it out for them to do
yeah.
at the level sports level.
I think it also, because you've got so much different stimulus happening all at once with like different languages, different styles of fighting. This protocol is really getting tested. Like the battery testing process of it is very quick and adaptive and reactive.
Yeah, the idea was to make it feasible, and that ultimately the bike test, the interval test, we will make it so anybody could do it anywhere. We have a lot of great technology here, so we're using Zwift bikes, so it has it all
Mm,
programmed out for us, which is really nice. But ultimately, we know we need to make it accessible to everybody. We have 700 athletes in the world. We got to make it accessible to all those athletes. And then the movement test. So the interval test takes about 15 minutes. The movement
okay.
test takes about another like 20, 30 minutes. So the idea is you can get that all done in an hour,
In that session, yeah.
right? And we can do it
That's it.
anywhere. You could do it on an S&C floor. You can do it on the mats, octagon. You can do it outside, anywhere that you want. So again, just like you said, like we're trying to make it efficient, valid, and really accessible.
With the different coaches that come in, and obviously everyone hires their own coaching stuff out with, how has it been accepted by outside coaches?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, I mean, so we have Forrest Griffin, who's like our head of athlete development.
Legend.
He really gives us, yeah, good insight
Fun
from a
story.
coaching perspective.
Fun
He
story.
came in and helped. Oh, sorry, fun story. Go for it.
No, no. So I've I've been a fan of the AFC since UFC 2, the game came out. I've been watching it since then, and that was my go-to player all the
Yes,
time.
yes, classic. He would
It was
be.
him or Chuck Liddell.
Yeah, he actually came in and gave had he helped us create this as well. This again, this wasn't just in isolation. So he there was a lot of things that we added that he had suggested for this test. Um, I think that more and more coaches are also, as athlete education is improving,
Mm,
coaching education is improving. And so they also, not all coaches are like this. There's still a lot of work, but more and more coaches are becoming really true advocates for their athletes as well,
mm,
where we will get texts from coaches being like, "Hey, I think somebody got a concussion. They're going to come in. Can you, like, what do you think? What is your assessment?" And so they're looking for somebody to tell them too that like this athlete is good or they're not. So we've gotten a lot of good feedback. There's still, I think, a lot more exposure and growth that we can do in that regard. But to have like Forrest kind of look at it, support it, back it, and be involved
mm.
with it as well, I think also, gives us some leverage too.
No, that's sick. I am aware that you're short for time, but if we can have a part two to this, that would be amazing. Um, because I think there's still some of the cognitive stuff that I kind of want to get more information on,
Mhm.
and it's something that's obviously getting a lot more popular now, and rightfully slow. But yeah, so if we can have a part two, that would be amazing.
People want to keep listening to me ramble, absolutely, anytime.
So that I have an issue when coaches say that, or practitioners say that, because so this is long form, and I that's why I never interrupted you for like the explanation of it. Like I had questions, but I can just write it down, and people can again pause and take time. But the more you speak about it, even if you repeat yourself, there might be three, like say you repeat yourself three times, there's still three different ways you said it.
Mm,
People can interpret those three different ways differently and get a better sense for the puzzle that you're trying to create. So for
yeah,
me, it's not rambling, it's you're getting more information out of it.
nice, sweet.
So yeah, so I really appreciate you for coming on.
Thank you. I'm
um
so sorry it's been a freaking mess and a disaster. I am hoping in the future it's going to be a lot easier. So I really do appreciate it. Just had a lot going on. So thank you.
no, it's all good. Again, coaches life and practitioners life in this industry is very fast and you have to adapt to everything. So it's all good.
Sweet.
If you can let everyone know where they can find you, I'll link your Instagram as well if people
Cool.
have questions.
So you can reach me at, you can DM me on Instagram. It's at Olive Abdoo. Or you feel free to shoot me an email at oabdoo@ufc.com. I really take pride in trying to get back to me because the only way I got here was people responding back to me and helping me get where I am at. So yeah, I'm always open to reaching out and collaborating.
Really appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Manning.